Hi, I'm Chrissy Hejny, and this is my presentation on collection policy and development and self-censorship. There are many reasons to have a collection policy. Three of the most essential reasons, in my opinion, are community, intellectual freedom, and standards. In their 2022 article, Philippi and Calzada mention the importance of knowing and understanding the identifying factors of the community that you're working in. And they also point out that the less diverse the community is, the more diverse the collection should be. In Silence in the Stacks, Tudor et al. Suggest that ALA standards require that the library should provide free access to a variety of viewpoints. This is especially important with the constant barrage of challenges that public libraries and school libraries have seen over the course of time, and especially recently. And of course, our textbook mentions that the need for collections to meet ALA standards is essential. Not only that, but state and local curriculum standards as well, and these shift. All of these things shift, right? So two of my major takeaways are that A, collection policy needs to be a working policy that can be amended with shifts in culture, standards, legislation, and that B, it needs to align again with the standards and purpose of librarianship as a whole, with emphasis on freedom of information and expression. The article I chose for self-censorship is called Silence in the Stacks, an Exploration of Self-Censorship in High School Libraries. They define self-censorship as occurring when a librarian deliberately decides against selecting material because it may be deemed controversial. The major problem with self-censorship is that it violates the standards of librarianship that require us to provide free access to information to every learner. So for instance, when a librarian self-censors by saying, for example, they're not going to include The Hate U Give in their collection, because it centers around the topic of police brutality against Black bodies, and that might ruffle some feathers, then they're actively denying their patrons that information and depriving their patrons of a critically acclaimed, award-winning book. They're deliberately prohibiting a voice from their library, and that's a clear violation of one of the central tenets of librarianship. The article details a study of the collections in school libraries of 90 Texas public high schools, 15 from each of the 6 UIL divisions. The questions they're asking are, what's the relationship between school characteristics and what's on their shelves? What's the degree to which librarians are self-censoring? And what are the controversial topics least likely to be included on the shelves? 3 things I learned here were Texas has the highest number of external book challenges in the country. If this had been a trivia question, I would have answered Florida or something. It speaks to the fact that I'm in the South Austin bubble, and my community locally, we just don't see these types of challenges. Secondly, campus size correlates with the expected number of controversial books, which that makes sense, but the fact that city size doesn't correlate with the number didn't make sense to me. However, that leads us to the next piece, which is that thankfully, librarians are not engaging in self-censorship at a high rate. That's the good news. The bad news is that budget and space more often limit selection than self-censorship. That's good, but at the same time, that can bring us back around to the potential of the librarian to, when limited by the budget, they may consciously choose a more palatable piece over a more controversial one. Okay, moving on to the children's collection development article. This resonated with me as a parent and validated the experience I've had with my own children. They typically gravitate toward the good books. They might be attracted at first to a book with a character on it that's familiar to them, but in the end, they typically reach for the books that they connect with once they start reading them. If my youngest had a choice between her auntie's old Cinderella book and Ada Twist Scientist, she's going to go for Ada every time. I like the idea of creating a short criteria list for children's books that could include the author's criteria that he uses, along with various award winners and finalists, so that we're curating a collection that'll foster not only a love of reading, but the willingness and the desire for kids to open any book, right? So the dinosaur lovers may reach for the T-Rex on the cover, but we also want to encourage a sense of adventure and the willingness to explore any book so that they always are lifelong lovers of learning and reading. Thank you so much for watching my presentation. Here are my references.